If you have, otherwise, I've got a bunch of questions that we've pulled from our client group over the course of the last week, and then we'll answer those questions live. So I am here to serve. Team, whatever you need, let's go. All right, first question. Why do I crave sugar at night even when I've eaten enough? What a question to start. Why do I crave sugar at night even when I've eaten enough? I mean, when you think about it, do you crave sugar because you're actually hungry? I don't think it's because you're hungry. I think it's because you're probably in the habit of sitting down and relaxing at night. And when you sit on your favorite couch, right, what do? You start a habit which becomes automatic. For me, the habit for a long time was I sit on my couch, I feel relaxed. The moment I feel relaxed, I have a beer in my hand and I start doing bicep curls. I think a lot of us know that habit, right? So I don't actually think it's that you are hungry. I think you're craving sugar because it's embedded in a pattern that's just triggered every night by finishing work or getting the kids to bed or sitting on a couch. So what we want to do is we want to go, okay, how can I get out of that habit loop? Does that make sense? How can I change that specific habit loop? And generally, what we've got to do is we've got to go and ask ourselves, rather than when that kind of every night I get that sugar craving, when that normally hits, what I would suggest you do is try to do something different immediately that's not sitting in the same couch or going to the fridge. Does this make sense? You've got to stop triggering that same habit over and over and over again. Okay, so traveling soul, best way to reduce healthy weight. Like, if the goal is to lose 10 kilograms, what should I target? Over what duration? That's a really, really smart question, traveling soul. And so, in other words, the question is, how much weight should you try to lose maybe before you take a break? Or how much weight should you try to lose? How quickly? Look, I think there's two camps here. And the reason I paused is because you need to step back and you need to ask yourself, which one of these camps do I sit in? If you sit in the camp where you've tried a bunch of things to lose weight before, and each one of those things seems to fail because you can't keep it up, it's probably that you're just biting off more than you can chew, right? As an example, when you think of all the different things that you could do to lose weight, that could include going to the gym, eating less calories, eating more protein, sleeping more, being less stressed, hanging out with friends more, drinking less alcohol. Like, the list is endless. But if you try to do all of those things at once, generally that means that you fall flat on your face. What is a good rate of weight loss? Maybe half a kilo a week. That wouldn't be too aggressive. But for you, that might be very aggressive. That might feel, so I would say work off about half a kilo a week at the start. It will slow down after that. You're not going to keep losing half a kilo a week all the way to your goal weight. And the reason that happens, the reason that you slow down is because we have something called our metabolism, and it works to make sure that you don't run yourself into the ground. So it slows you down. And as you get closer to your ideal weight, things will get harder. That's the reason why most people aren't walking around with six packs, is because they can go from 40% body fat all the way down to 30% body fat, all the way down to 20% body fat. But as soon as a woman gets kind of under that 25% body fat, and then men under the 20% body fat, it gets quite hard to get off, because your body doesn't necessarily want to have you in that range. So you got to fight harder after that. Hopefully that answers the question. Guys, if you have any questions, and good morning, look at everyone else coming in here. This is awesome. So happy to answer any questions you've got, guys, in the comments. All right, so we had a question here. Nicole said, is doing just 2 sets instead of 3 detrimental to my progress? This is a really good question, Nick. The short answer is, one of the things that determines whether you progress or not, one of the things is what's called volume. Okay. And volume just basically means the amount of work that you're doing in the gym. And if you think of it like this, the volume is going to be the amount of sets you do multiplied by the amount of reps you do multiplied by the amount of weight you do. That's the volume equation. So what can happen is if you, for example, were short on time and you were to reduce the set number by 1, as an example, but you increased the weight and you kept the same number of reps, then the absolute volume is basically the same. Now, I don't want to complicate it too much. The short answer is it won't necessarily make a difference, even though it feels like you're doing less time or less work. What I do want you to know, Nick, and you're in the gym and it's amazing, what I do want you to know is this. The key is when you're doing those 2 sets, they have to be good, hard-working sets, right? And I know that you know this because you're not a pussy, all right? We shouldn't be going in there and just lifting the blue dumbbells because we always lift the blue dumbbells, right? We've got to be slowly inching either the reps or the weights up in an alternative way so that we get stronger. And those sets that you're doing, they are hard sets. And most busy parents might need to make the change from 4 sets down to 3 sets or down to 2 sets on some days because they just don't have time that morning. The mistake, Nick, would be to think that there's no point doing the exercise because you can only do 2 sets. Like, that is definitely not true. Definitely not true. Okay. Really good question. Okay. So Lynn, this is a great question. When I'm walking, I always feel off balance and lightheaded. What can I do to help? Okay. I'm going to say to you, Lynn, the things that you probably already know, and then I'm going to tip onto the medical side of things and then suggest that we could look at that a little bit further. So lightheaded and balance, that could be literally a sign that you are dehydrated. It could be a sign that you have some electrolyte imbalances, and it could be a sign that you are always walking when you're fasted and you just don't have enough available fuel in your system. These are the first things that I would go to. As an example, let's say, Lynn, you get up in the morning and you kind of have a cup of coffee and then go for a walk. And we don't need the full explanation, but let's just say that's what you do. And then you go and walk 10,000 steps. Well, you're waking up dehydrated. You're waking up not having any fuel in your system since the night before, which is okay, but that might make you feel a little bit lightheaded because essentially when you're lightheaded, what's happening is you've got a lack of blood, oxygen, and nutrients getting to your brain, right? So it could just be that. And that could be fixed by something as simple as having more fluid before you go, some electrolytes in your drink, a snack before you go. And a snack could be something like a banana, simple like that. Okay. It could be a yogurt, something simple like that, some fruit in the morning. And you're essentially giving your body what it needs to alleviate those symptoms. Having said that, if we're talking about in the middle of the day and for not very short walks, there could be something a little bit more medical going on. Now, Lynn, I'm not sure if you were around for yesterday's podcast. I would suggest go and listen to that podcast if you weren't, but I'll summarize. The podcast that I did was with one of our clients who has something called POTS syndrome. And basically what that is that it's a lack of blood going to the brain. And so every time she stands up for long periods, like trying to walk 10,000 steps in one go, she feels extremely lightheaded, right? And what that can end up doing is meaning that she should not be doing 10,000 steps at one go. For her, stepping might not even be that smart an approach. She would be better, for example, Lynn, in her case, to go and do some riding where her body weight's supported and there's less need to push the gravity all the way from the blood, all the way from the feet, all the way to the head, right? So it's really going to depend. I would go with a lifestyle intervention there first, making sure that you are well hydrated, have your electrolytes, and you're fueled before you go on these longer walks. But if it persists, I would then go and have some blood tests done, some blood pressure done. It might be something as simple as, oh, you know what? I've got low blood pressure. Or it could be something a little bit more advanced, like I've got insulin resistance starting. Does this make sense? So I would approach it in a slow, gradual way like that. Okay, so hopefully that helps, Lynn. Tamara says, if you're going to fast in the morning, should you do this consistently for a period of time? Can you do one day and not the next? And do it for a couple of days? Does that make sense? Yeah. Does it have to be consistent to be effective? No. Really good question, Tam. Go back again, Tam. I don't know how often you listen to the podcast, Tam, but I want to encourage you to go back about 2 episodes, and I did one which was about breakfast, and we talked about either the 2 strategies on breakfast for busy parents. Either 1, fasting, or 2, having a high protein breakfast. And it should be one of those 2 things, okay? Not sitting there with a bunch of Kellogg's cornflakes and wondering why you're not feeling good. If you're going to fast, that's cool. If you're going to eat breakfast, that's cool. You don't have to marry to one. And I want to double down on this fasting message. Guys, fasting is not magic. It's just not magic, okay? Let me remind you, Tam, of the basics. If you are normally a busy girl that wakes up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock and has breakfast at, say, 7 o'clock, and you normally finish dinner at about 7 o'clock p.m., that means you're eating in a 12-hour, roughly, eating window. When you fast and you skip breakfast, for example, and you have your first meal at, say, 11 or 12, now you're shrinking that down to a 6-hour eating window. So how does fasting work? Well, are you more likely to eat food in 12 hours or 6 hours? Most people are going to eat less calories in 6 hours than 12. That's how it works. It's not magic, Tam. All it is shrinking the eating window, and you eat less in a smaller eating window. That's not at all magic. Okay, so if, for example, you could do fasting during the weeks, or the weekdays when you're super busy, and eat breakfast, a high protein breakfast every weekend, and eat a larger eating window on the weekend. Does that make sense? Don't overthink it. What do I break my fast with? Whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. Fasting has been done by humans forever in a day. And then someone really, really smart put the label intermittent fasting on top of it. And then all of a sudden it became this thing. Is it effective? Yes, it can be a very effective strategy to help you control your calories. But there's nothing magic going on. Okay, just want to make that really, really clear. Guys, if you have questions and you want to ask them into the comments, I'm here and I'll keep answering questions for as long as you want. Good morning, Pascal. How are you, buddy? And good morning, Amy. Now, Melissa asks, are we meant to aim for 10,000 steps all at once or during the day over the whole day? The short answer to that is, Mel, also does not matter. Okay, does not matter. I think, and the studies support this, that actually you're better to break it up. And I'll tell you why. Let me explain why. Why is walking good? Okay, it's free. You can do it anywhere. You don't have to get dressed for it. Like literally anyone can do it. No one's generally lost the skill of walking, right? This is why walking is the push. Having said that, okay, you could do it all in one go. I tend to do that a lot because if I don't, I will end up reaching the end of the day and I have a bunch of steps to do, and that's frustrating for me. But a better way to do it is to break it up. Now, why is that? When you break up your steps, walking actually is really helpful for your digestion. So what ends up happening is if you can get in the habit of walking after each meal that you have. This is wonderful for your digestion and what's called your insulin balance, okay? Your insulin sensitivity, which all that means is the way that your ability handles your body handles the sugar that you give it. If you walk after meals, it helps your digestion immensely, particularly if you've had a bigger meal. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is we tend to, when we sit slumped in positions for long periods of time, I just want you to think about, like, if you're sitting at a desk for, say, 3 hours or 4 hours, you get into these really bad postural positions. And this is where you start to, like, lose the integrity of your musculature and your skeleton. So you're in these crouched positions. And this is where, like, the forward head and the rounded shoulders, and then you're at a computer all day. This is where it starts. Now, if you get up and walk every 2 hours and you just do 2,000 steps each time, you're getting out of that position. So it's actually very, very beneficial to pull yourself out of that position versus being stuck in it. Does this make sense? Hopefully that answers the question, Mel, and it's a great question. The short answer is being more mobile and interrupting the day is a good thing. And by the way, if you're drinking lots of fluid, if you're drinking lots of water, you're going to have to get up constantly because you're going to have to pee every 2 hours, which is actually a really good trick, right? If you're drinking lots of water, you're going to have to get up and pee, which means you're getting out of that postural slump. Does that make sense? Okay, team. So any other live questions, you can ask them and I will be happily answering. I saw a question here saying, are chia seeds good? Yeah, they are good. They're a good source of fiber and a good source of protein. I don't think they're magic like people make them out to be. And there are plenty of foods that are they're just not magic. They're foods, generally speaking, like, when they say things like superfoods, like, what is a superfood? All a superfood is a label that people give foods when they're, let's say, have a very high level of what are called antioxidant vitamins. So I'll give you an example of a superfood. A superfood is something like a blueberry. Why? Because for its small size, it has a ton of antioxidants. A tomato, superfood, ton of antioxidants. In other words, it's very rich in, but these foods aren't going to help you lose weight. These foods just will give you perhaps a bit more of a glow, particularly if you're used to having a lot of processed foods. So I think that things like berries are absolutely superfoods, but not because they're going to supercharge your weight loss. They're not going to do any of that. Okay, they're just going to, if you think of it this way, there's 3 levels. The top level is calories. Calories determine what you weigh. Simple as that. Calories determine what you weigh. Next level is macros, protein. Protein determines how you look. Next level, vitamins, minerals, micronutrients determine how you feel. What you weigh, how you look, how you feel. Does this make sense? Okay, we'll move on from that question. Guys, if you have any other questions, you can ask them in the comments. How do I know when I should increase weight versus increase reps? Really good question. When you are at a point where you're following a proper program, and if you're not following a proper program because you're not in Better Body Academy, you're very, very silly. You should be following a structured program. If you are in Better Body Academy and you're not following your program, you kind of got to question yourself, why are you going off program? Why are you thinking that you know better than your coaches? You're paying us for the service of directing you to work out a certain way, but then you're not doing that. So that little rant aside, how do you know when you should increase the reps or the weight? Let's just say the rep range says 8 to 12 repetitions, which is where we're going to base most of our rep ranges for busy parents, okay, in that 8 to 12 repetition range. Let's say that we're doing a squat, okay, let's say it's a goblet squat, and you can do a 20 kilo goblet squat for 8 repetitions. What I would probably do is I would try to push till you can get that same 20 kilos, but not 8 repetitions, maybe 9, 10, 11, 12 repetitions. So the higher end of your repetition range. Now, once you've climbed to the higher end of your repetition range, this means that you've got stronger. You've got stronger because you're lifting the same weight at a higher repetition range. Does that make sense? You're doing more reps of the same weight. That means you are stronger. However, what you don't want to do is start doing 15 reps of 20 kilos, 20 reps of 20 kilos. What you need to do is instead toggle up the weight instead. So you the way you want to play it is you think of it like a seesaw. Okay, does that make sense, guys? You increase reps, increase weight, increase reps, increase weight. If I'll give you an example that's a bit more for the boys, right? If I was trying to increase my bench press, and I'm always trying to increase the weights that I'm lifting, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to choose the 40 kilogram dumbbells when I'm doing my bench press. And let's say my repetition target is 8. I'm going to push to see if I can get that 8. And then I want to try to get that 9. And then maybe push to being able to get 10. Now I can see that I'm getting stronger at 40 kilos. I'm going to knock it up to 42.5 kilos. But I know that I'm not going to lift 10 repetitions. I'm probably going to be more lifting 7 repetitions. And I'm going to stay on that weight until I can get back to 8, 9, 10 repetitions. Now I'm going to drop the repetitions again. I'm going to increase the weight again. So it's almost like a feedback loop or a seesaw. Does this make sense? Just let me know if that answers the question, because this is a really, really common question that a lot of people don't know how to navigate. Good morning, Paulie. How are you, brother? Guys, if you have any questions, you've got to bang them in the comments or I can't answer your stick points. Okay, why do I start strong and then fall off after a few weeks? I think this is probably a very, very relevant question right now. How many of us have started the year strong, but kind of feel like we're just hanging on? We're just hanging on. This is a really common thing. And it's because we've often set our goals around feeling like I can't wait till the end of 2025. This year's been tough. I just want a fresh start. And then 2026 hits and you're feeling charged up, right? You're feeling like this year's going to be the new version of me. I'm going to commit to 10,000 steps every day. I'm going to go to the gym and train 3 days a week. I'm going to eat healthy. And then by 20th of January, life starts to hit and you start to go, oh, that motivation that you had at the start of the year is starting to wear a little bit thin. Why? Not because you're broken, because it was only ever an emotion that you were feeling. Motivation is just an emotion. It's a feeling. It comes and goes. And so if you're relying on motivation to be able to stick to the plan, it's going to be a very, very rough ride. It really is. So what do we have to do? We have to fall back on our system. Now, inside of Better Body Academy, what is our system? I had this call with one of our girls yesterday who's been with us for 3 years, and it was a very, very simple call. It is, right, you don't need to do anything crazy or outlandish. You need to go back to what you know you need to do. Walk a little bit more, lift weights a couple of times a week, and pay attention to your eating, getting rid of the liquid calories and eating whole foods. It's boringly simple. It's boringly simple. But we make it this really difficult thing. No, it's simple. The question is more, the difficulty is more, how do I stick to the simplicity? How do I do that? That's about having a system. That's not waiting to feel motivated, because the reality is most of us feel motivated to not go to work, sit on a couch, eat pizza and drink beer. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So we've got to work out how do we overcome that feeling. Does that make sense? Okay, Kat says, Do I need to feel sore the next day to be making progress in strength training? Or does that indicate that I've overdone my weights? Oh, Kate, what a great question. What an excellent question. And I'm glad you asked it, because I think that there's a lot of people out there that think no pain, no gain. And it doesn't matter what I say to some busy guys, they just want to torment themselves. And that's okay too. But the reality is, and I'm going to put my hand up here. I'm down on the northern beaches at the moment, Kat, and I don't have my own gym membership. And the cost for a drop-in is at the local gym here is $35 per session, right? Or I can get a week for 150, right? Sure as hell, I'm going to train almost every day. Why? Because I want to make use of, if I'm going to spend 150 bucks on that membership for the week, no problems at all. I'm going to go and train, and I'm pretty much going to train every day. But I'm doing that, Kat, knowing that it's not actually that beneficial to be training every day at all, especially for the average person. And I know that when I train every day, I get sore on top of sore on top of sore. And it's pretty dumb, actually, to keep training every day when you're sore because you haven't recovered from the previous session. What busy parents have to ask themselves is, am I training because I love training and I love the mindset? Like, that's one thing that you can't argue against, right? I just feel better when I'm training mentally. It's a mental health treatment for me. But do I have to train every day? No. Should I be having an extra day off when I'm sore? Yes. Have I overdone it with my weights if I'm feeling extremely sore? Potentially. It depends where you are in your journey, Kat. If you are really new to training, you're not going to be able to totally escape soreness. Think of it almost like you're walking in a room and you walk into a room and everyone's sleeping, and all of a sudden you shake them and wake them up, right? You're shaking your body and waking it up at the start. And for a lot of people, it's like you're just not going to escape that feeling of soreness because your muscles are doing stuff that they haven't been doing recently, right? You're putting them outside of their comfort zone. But if you're 2-3 years into a journey and you are really sore all the time, that is an indication that your recovery is not good and you need to focus on your recovery. The short answer to your question is you do not need to feel sore in order to progress at all. It might be an indication that you've overdone it, but if you're very new to training, you're still going to have some level of soreness for any low level of volume because you're new to it. It's a new or novel stimulus for you. Does that make sense? So I would think about, okay, how many days should you be training? Kat, if you are, again, if you're new, I would think if 2 days, 3 days max is a really, really good start. You don't want to do any more than that. I would try to have a break off. People say, what's the best split in terms of days? It's always for you to have alternative days off. That would be the best setup. For example, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That makes the most amount of sense. Then you're giving yourself that day of recovery. And the way that you should treat your recovery, Kat, would be walking, gets the blood volume, pushes through, and you're good. Having said that, if the only time you can train is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, because of the fact that you work Thursday to Sunday, there is nothing wrong with training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but you might want to back off the amount of volume that you're doing each day. Does that make sense? You said I'm generally not sore. Yeah, so maybe if you are well trained and you're generally not sore, maybe you pushed a little bit hard in that session. Like, it's hard to argue that that is a bad thing unless it's debilitating you for days, right? It's hard to argue that that's a bad thing because you do need to be pushing it a little bit to see some results. But at the same account, it's kind of like, do you need to be, am I always sore as a prerequisite to having done a good program, a good day? No, definitely not. So it's not an indicate. What's really important, Kat, is this. Is your strength improving over time? If your strength is improving over time, you are progressing. How do you know you're getting stronger, Kat? You're lifting more weight, you're lifting more reps, your recovery is better, you're more energized, your libido is better, there's a bunch of what we call biofeedback, which would indicate that you're progressing. But if you are debilitated, can hardly move, no libido, there's a bunch of things there that maybe could be to do with your workouts or could be to do with the fact that your calories are too low. Okay, so we had to kind of step back and look at the entire picture. All right, guys, we're kind of moving a little bit to the end of this podcast, unless you have some questions you want me to answer, such as that from Pascal. Good question, retraining, Kat. So Pascal says, 3 days have been my sweet spot, and it's been the most beneficial for me in my time. Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday mornings suit me. Recovery days in between is key. Yeah, Pascal's bang on right. And for someone like Pascal, who's getting really good results and has lost over 20 kilos and he looks like a bloody fitness model now, right? It would be easy for him to say, oh, if I could do 3 days and get this much work, well, what if I do 4 and 5 days? I could get even better results. Like, the hard part is, like, this is a lifestyle that you're trying to create. Unless you're trying to be a fitness influencer, which is not your goal, I'm assuming, then let's work out how we keep this consistent over a long period of time rather than intense over a very short period of time. And there's a big difference. Okay, we've got Michelle asking the question, on the back of food labels, do you go by sugar or fat, and what is good? Michelle, I pay very little attention to both. And without it sounding like a flex, I am a university qualified dietitian. I pay very little attention to both fat and sugar. The reason I pay little attention to fat and sugar is because the total calories that you see on a label is going to be the sum of the calories coming from fat, sugar, and protein. We call that the macros. So if you think of it like this, top level is total calories, Michelle. Total calories. What makes up total calories is the amount of fat, the amount of protein, and the amount of sugar. So I don't worry about looking where the calories come from a weight loss perspective. What I care about is just the total amount, the total burden that is on the total energy that's coming into my system. Because I know that if I constantly eat more energy than I am burning, I will gain weight. If I constantly eat less energy than I'm burning, I will lose weight. So I don't worry really about individuals. The only thing that I kind of pay attention to is the type of fat, which is called saturated fat or trans fat. I might have a little bit of a peep on that, but apart from that, I don't pay attention. The only thing I do, Kat, is go to the total calories and I say, okay, is this a food that I would consider an everyday food, or is this a treat food? Or I might take 2 packets of yogurt or 2 packets of 2 protein bars, doesn't matter what it is. I put them side by side and I look at the total calories for the same serving size. I look at the total calories and I go, well, this one's got 400 calories. This one's got 350 calories. Okay, so this one is lower from a calorie perspective. Cool. Then I will look at the protein. If the one that contains 400 calories versus the one that contains 300 calories, if the one that contains 400 calories has 20 grams of protein and this one has 25 grams of protein, this one's got more protein, less calories, I'm choosing this one. If, however, this one's got 50 more calories, but it's got 50 grams of protein in it, let's just say it's got double the protein, I'm going to have the one with more calories, knowing that it's got substantially more protein in it. So does that answer your question, Michelle? I only look at two things. I don't look at sugar. I don't look at fat. I just look at total calories and total amount of protein. And I make my decisions on food based on those two things. And I suggest you do the exact same thing. This will simplify everything for you, because you're going to see people that are going to demonize sugar and they're going to demonize fat. And it's just an argument that we don't need to have, because at the end of the day, most of us are trying to manage a weight problem. And this is the way to manage a weight problem. Where the calories come from doesn't matter. As an example, if you are eating 700 grams of protein a day, and you all know that protein is good, it's still giving you too many calories relative to what you need. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to go to the question here from Susan. Good morning, Susan, and good morning, Kerry, as well. How do you know when it's time to transition from machines to free weights? I never used machines before, and I miss my dumbbells. Yeah, good question. Well, that's an interesting question, Susan, because most of the time it's the other way around, right? People go from machines to dumbbells. They haven't done dumbbells before because they're not confident enough to lift free weights. So when we talk about free weights, what we're talking about is free of cables, free of machines. So that would include, free weights would include dumbbells and barbells, right? Most people, Susan, don't start there. They start at machines and then progress. That's generally the trend. It might be that you start with body weight, then you go to resistance bands maybe, and then you might go to machine-based, and then you might go to free weights, including dumbbells or barbells. And that's the more advanced form of training. Why? Because it requires you to be stable, right? But that doesn't make machines bad. When you say, how do I know that it's time to transit? My program, personally, I will always have a mix of machines and free weights. It's not one or the other. Okay, that's how it is. Now, it depends on how and where you're training. If you're training at home, Suze, well, then you're probably not going to have machines. And so bringing in the dumbbells is going to be necessary. I think a better question to ask is, if you are training at home and you're training with dumbbells, how do you progress this if you've only got one set of dumbbells, which is the problem with most people's home training. They literally just have the blue dumbbells in their garage. That's not going to help your training. You need to get a set of adjustable dumbbells so that as you get stronger, you can increase the difficulty and continue to improve. You need to have adjustable dumbbells that you can screw more weight onto. Does that make sense? And so how do you know when it's time to progress? Well, you can progress now. If you miss your dumbbells, we can build you a dumbbell-based workout that you can do at home. If you're training in a gym and you have access to machines, I see no reason why we would necessarily just isolate to dumbbells when we have the ability to use machines and integrate them and do some really, really good machine-based stuff. As an example, let's say you're training at home, Suze, and you've only got dumbbells, you could do goblet squats as your primary leg targeting activity. But I think that there are better machines than goblet squats are at dumbbells. I think they're better machines in a gym. For example, I would personally prefer to be doing a 45-degree leg press and putting a bunch of weight on that versus doing dumbbell goblet squat in a gym, because you can just add more weight and that's going to be more functional. So it's not a choice, Suze, it's probably more determined by where you're training. Okay. All right, guys, we're going to wind this up in a second. I'm going to answer these last two questions. Nay says, what's your thoughts about Ozempic, Mounjaro? Look, man, I absolutely think that they are, I wouldn't say necessary for some people, but a very, very good idea. The problem is that most people, and I walked into a barber the other day and literally walked in to get my hair cut. And the first thing he said to me is, oh, you're a fitness coach. Can you get peptides? All my friends are taking retatrutide and Ozempic, and it's kind of like, oh man, I get it. Like, we're busy and we're trying to get the answer as quickly as possible. And I fully support people using peptides if they're doing it with a coach. And most importantly, there is some lifestyle intervention, because here's what happens. The reality is humans are pretty lazy, the majority of us. So what we do is we take Ozempic, it'll suppress the crap out of our appetite, and you'll start losing weight. And a lot of the weight that you're losing is going to be your muscle. Fat as well, but muscle. And you might be like, well, I don't care. I just want to get this weight off. Sure. Except you're going to eventually come off the Ozempic or the peptides that you're taking. And then that hunger signal is just going to return. And when that hunger signal returns and you've lost a bunch of muscle, now the weight is going to come back so quickly that you'll be way worse than you were at the start, because now you're just overweight again with less muscle. So you'll lose it. So the key part now is how do you have the medication at the same time as look at your lifestyle? And for a lot of people, this could be a really good, we've had a couple of clients that have really struggled for a long time to see any progress. And I fully supported them taking something like Ozempic, but I know that these specific clients have good protein intake, way upwards of 100 grams a day. They are resistance training, they are walking, but they were just struggling to control food noise and food cravings. And in that circumstance where the lifestyle is solid, matched with the medication, that's a good pairing. And you should have a coach to guide you on this, brother. Final question that we're going to answer today is coming from Mel. Okay, so I used to be quite fit, go to the gym 4 to 5 times a week. I knew everyone there. 3 years ago, I fell at 40, I fell pregnant and have a beautiful daughter, but I put on so much weight. How can I find the confidence to go back to the gym knowing everyone there and being 25 kilos heavier? Wow, that is a question. That is a real question. And so the first thing that comes to mind, and I'm saying this as a guy who can't be pregnant, right, is that I cannot imagine how hard I would find it to see my body changing as a consequence of a big life event like that. Like I honestly, I feel like I would really struggle. And it's not that pregnancy has to mean that you're overweight, but if you haven't gone into the pregnancy at a healthy weight and getting it off, or maybe there were complications, there could be a bunch of things that have happened there, Mel, and it's just not, yeah, you feel like a different person, you know. And I could put a nice slant on this, which is you are a different person. Like you have a very challenging situation. You have gone through a life experience. And when I think about the trauma that I went through with my wife for her first pregnancy, that's hard, right? So I think the first thing that you've got to do here is remove the guilt and shame perhaps that you feel about this weight being on. The reality is, Mel, you're worried about the opinions of people that you don't really like you don't need their validation. And something that I see so much of in gyms is people think that it's full of people who are like pros. Firstly, you've got to find a good gym, right? But these people, you said they're your friends or people that you know. Okay, would they not support you going back into the gym to address your health post-pregnancy? Would they not welcome you back and say, you're worried about the initial shock where they're just like, oh, wow, like you've put on some weight, 100%, and you're doing something about it, right? You're doing something about it. This is just about your internal head game, Mel. And I'm not knocking that at all. It's hard, but this is about the internal head game. And what's going to happen is that weight, when you start to get back into motion and you're surrounded by your crowd, you've got your BBA crowd, and then you've got your crowd at the gym that supports you, man, like, it's a pretty shitty gym if it doesn't lift you up. Every gym that I've ever trained at has lifted me up. It's full of people that are trying to improve themselves. And I think that what you've got to do is just rip the scab off and walk back in, right? Walk back in. If they're gonna judge you a little bit, okay, cool, whatever. But you could ask yourself some pretty heavy questions here. You could say, well, who's this for? Is this for me and my babies and my family? Or am I worried about failing and looking like a dick in front of people that they're not going to know me at 50 and 60 and 70 and 80. So I'm going to fucking look after me. And that's how I think. You're going to get judged. The reality is, Mel, you're going to get judged if you do and if you don't. You're going to get judged. If you do it, you're going to be judged. And if you don't do it, you're going to be judged. If you're overweight, you're going to be judged. But then if you're underweight, you're too skinny. Like, what I've realized is that people just judge you. That's it. They were in my community, but I'm so embarrassed. Yes, this is my mental health that tells me people will look at me and think, oh my God, Mel, okay, cool, get over it. Like, honestly, if you're committed to this journey and you are, because you're here and you're paying for it, like, Mary's saying in the comments, and she's quoting Mel Robbins, just let them judge you. It's great. Cool, judge me. All right, I'm working out over here. Like, isn't it funny that we're so hesitant to do things? And look, Mel, the equivalent is in my life, I didn't go after what I wanted for a very long period of time because I was scared of my friends thinking, what's he doing? Why is he talking about this stuff on social media? We're like, who's he think he is? All the same things. It's just a fear of failure, a fear of judgment. That's what holds us back in life. But if you can get to the point where you're like, zero fucks given, man, like, whatever. I'm going in at this. This is important to me. You do it on your terms. You don't live your life on other people's terms. I hope that helps, Mel. It's more about, let's get ourselves into a state where, you know what? I'm just going to go back in. And if people say, are you okay? You put on a bit of weight? Yeah, I did. I put on a weight. I had a baby, you fucking idiot. Like, shouldn't feel guilty about what you've been through. You had a baby. You looked after your baby. Now it's time to look after yourself. Okay. Last comment from Sonia. Question from Sonia. So true. Some people might never lose that food noise like Oprah. Do you think that's a genetic factor or a habit? Why you can't lose the food noise? I think it could be any number of things, Son. I think there is a genetic habit to it. Yes, I do think so. I think that a lot of the times we think it's genetic, but it's the household we grew up in. It's like, it's not genetic, but in a way it's handed down from our parents, right? Not through genes, but through behavior. Maybe we grew up, as an example, food noise. Like, I grew up in a family that was, you don't throw food out. Like, you eat all your food before you get any form of dessert, right? You sit at the table to eat your food. You don't tell mum you're hungry at the end of your meal because otherwise your dad will take a full packet of fucking peas and stick them in a microwave and then put them in front of you and make you eat the entire thing. Like, by the way, I love my parents, but that's what I grew up in. And so, yeah, I think it can be wired into you. I do think that you can lose that food noise. And I think that the food noise, if you get some assistance with it, I think the food noise can be lost when you fix the underlying, let's just say if there's any trauma involved, if you fix the underlying dysregulation with eating, what they've shown is that overweight people generally are less sensitive to the responses of satiety and fullness, right? As you start to lose weight, those signals become better. You become better at realizing, like, I don't need to keep eating because I'm full, and I don't need to keep starving myself. I am hungry. Those signals actually work better under the control of some hormones called ghrelin, insulin, cortisol, these types of hormones that determine how hungry you are. Yeah, environmental seems to be the new word. Well, I don't think it's the new word. I think it's the forever word. That's the reason why Better Body Academy works, is because we change the environment that you surround yourself with. Does that make sense? Anyway, team, I'm going to love you and leave you there. Hopefully this session has been helpful, and we do it at the same time every day. I'm off to do another little kickoff call, and I'll see you guys on the flip.